As far as Hume is concerned, Hume is a culmination of empiricism because empiricism could have been culminated only in a Hume philosophy. Because Locke says that actually Locke has divided the quality into two different categories. First is the primary quality, which exists in the goods and things outside, and the secondary qualities are produced in mind by the primary quality. Like for example, if the solidness exists outside, but when we hit any solid object, then we get the pain. This pain actually exists inside. So that's why, that's how the solidness, when you hit any solid object, it creates sound. So sound actually exists in mind, whereas the primary quality exists outside. Berkeley refuted this separation given by the Locke, saying that there is no need for uh, you know primary quality, because both primary quality as well as secondary quality can exist in mind. So we need not to actually accept something outside of our mind, because according to the Berkeley, only God exists and the soul exists. God is producing these percept in our soul. So that's how, according to the Berkeley, the outside world is nothing but the percept, and these percepts are being produced by the God. But Hume says that I neither get any kind of perception of the soul, or I don't get, nor I get perception of the God. So actually, I cannot say that whether the God exists or not, or the soul exists or not, because I don't get the perception of both. So that's why in Berkeley philosophy also we discussed that he rigorously actually did not apply his own philosophy, because if he had applied properly, then he could have also said that the God and soul is also some kind of percept, because you don't get any kind of perception of the God and soul. So Hume basically uses two words, that is impression and idea. So whenever we perceive anything, then we get the impression. For example, if we suppose, if we see some color, then if we suppose if we experience the fire, then immediately we get the impression. So impression, with the time, after some period of time, it will fade away, but its effect will remain forever. This effect, uh, actually the Hume uh, call this effect as an idea. So impression, whenever you experience anything, whenever you perceive anything, you get the impression, and this impression, the effect of this impression is idea. Gradually the impression will fade away, but the idea will remain forever. For example, if so that's how exactly the Hume describe. So on the basis of this impression and idea, he talks about the causality, because he says that regardless of how many time I experience the uh, fire and heat, but I never get any idea that the fire has a capacity to produce the heat, because what actually I observe that fire takes place, and immediately after the fire the heat is produced, but I can never ever say that the fire is a cause of heat, because I don't get any impression or any idea that the fire has a capability to produce the heat. So whenever, if you ask me that whether the fire is a cause of the heat, then I can only describe this casual relationship uh, uh, as a sequence, because I can only say that after the fire, the impression of the heat generally comes. But I can never ever say that the fire has a capability to produce the heat. So he says that we cannot say that the fire is a cause of heat. And because this casual relationship is based upon the perception, that's why there cannot be necessary relationship between the fire and heat. Because if this relation was based upon the reasoning, then this relation would have been completely necessary. But because it is this relationship, this between the fire and the heat is based upon the perception, that's why this relationship will always be contingent. So we can say that the after it is possible that the after the fire, it is possible that the heat may not be produced. So that's why this relationship, the causal relationship of causality, is a contingent relationship according to the Hume. He says that the why exactly we start expecting that after the fire the heat is definitely going to be produced, because of the fact that when we when we actually perceive this fire and heat many times in a sequential manner, then these idea get actually connected with each other in our mind. And whenever we perceive receive the impression of the fire, then immediately the idea of heat comes into our mind. So that's why we start expecting that the heat is definitely going to be produced after the fire. But he says in the nature there is no necessary, because this relationship is based upon the perception. That's why it always will be contingent. Here, as a criticism, we can say that Hume here is not correct, because on the one hand you are saying that in the whenever in the nature the fire and heat don't have a necessary relationship, but in the mind, when you receive the idea of fire, then immediately the idea of heat will come into mind. So here in the mind, this relationship is necessary. This is the discrepancies actually in the Hume's philosophy. He should have, if he is expecting the necessary relationship in the mind, then he also could have accepted this relationship in the nature also. So that's why, according to the Hume, if you ask to Hume about the causality, then he will say that this relationship is a contingent. So I cannot say for sure whether the after the heat, the fire, the heat is definitely going to be produced. It is possible that it may not be produced sometime, because it's a contingent. This relationship is a contingent. Then he talks about the soul also. He says, regardless of how many times I peep inside my soul, myself, whenever I try to see inside me, then I never ever get any idea of soul, because whenever I see inside, then I always get the perception or the impression of either happiness or sorrow or hate, or you can say love. I get this impression, but I never ever get any kind of impression that there is somebody who is feeling happy. Because whenever I peep inside, then I get the idea of happiness, I get the idea of hate, get the idea of love, but I never ever get any impression that the somebody is there inside me who is happy. So that's why if you ask me what exactly is soul, then I will say that it is nothing but just a bundle of perception, because all these perception keep on coming. One perception produce another perception produce another perception, and that's how this perception keep on going. So whenever I peep inside, I get the idea of these only perception, but I never ever get idea of somebody who is feeling happy. So that's why, if you ask me what exactly soul is, then I will say that soul is nothing but it's a bundle of only perception. Then Hume is asked that if there is no bundle of no soul, then how can you say that I am the same person who was in Delhi some 3 years back? So Hume actually answered this question saying that whenever actually this is what actually Hume called it as a personal identity, because this perception has a some kind of a relationship, either the causal relationship or the relationship of similarity. On the basis of this relationship, whenever you uh, think about one perception, one idea, then these ideas are linked with this either with the causality, relationship of causality, or the ideas are similar to each other. That's why you start thinking that I am the same person who actually was in Delhi some 3 years back. Because when you think about one idea, this idea is linked with another idea, so you get another idea, then another idea is linked with another idea, so that's how you can you these idea get linked. And whenever you start thinking about this idea, then you get the perception that these all this event has taken place in my own life, and that's how you start feeling that I am the same person which was in Delhi some 3 years back. So that's how you get this actually sense of self identity. Then about the God, he says that I don't get any perception of God. That's why he says that I cannot say whether God exists or not. So this is what is called as skepticism, because Hume has become skeptic. Because if you ask him about the soul, then he will say that I won't get any idea, I don't get any idea about soul, that's why I cannot say whether soul exists or not. So according to Hume, the psychology is not possible. Then if you talk about the world, then he says that generally uh, world is driven by the relationship of causality, and then he has some kind of he is skeptic about the relationship of causality itself. That's why he says I don't know whether the causality is true or not. Say people say that the God is a cause of the world, but I I I doubt about the relationship causality itself. That's why I cannot say that the God is a cause of the world or not. So that's how, according to the Hume, the cosmology is not possible. Then if somebody ask Hume about what is moral and what is immoral, then he says that I cannot say that I'm not sure about what exactly the morality is, because if anything suits your purpose, you call it as a moral. If it goes against your interest, then you call it as a immoral. So we cannot say objectively that what exactly the morality is. So that's how ethics is also not possible according to the Hume. That's how Hume has become skeptic. But Hume says that whenever I feel, if you believe in what exactly has been said by the Hume, then the whole life will become very problematic, because whenever you will feel, whenever you have a fever, you will not take medicine because you are not sure whether the medicine is going to reduce the fever or not. So that's how, if you have to heat yourself up, then you will not lit the fire, because you don't know whether the fire will produce heat or not. So that's how the whole life will become very difficult, if you believe in what exactly has been said by Hume. But Hume himself says that whenever I talk to my friends, then I don't doubt whether they exist or not. Whenever I feel cold, whenever I shiver, then I actually lit the fire. I never ever doubt that the fire, whether fire is going to produce heat or not, because he says that I am skeptic, uh, uh, because I just want to let the philosopher know that exactly they should think about only those things which can be inquired by the human being. We should not be become a dogmatic, in the sense that we should not say that whatever we are saying, that is only true. So some little bit of skepticism is necessary, according to Hume.